Welcome to this introduction to research in science. In this video, I'm going to focus on the sources you can consult when doing scientific research. This will be helpful for those of you embarking on an essay, a presentation, a video for social media, or a literature review, as well as those of you looking to do some experimental research that requires a background understanding of the problem to be explored. This guide without audio is on the school library's Instagram account at King School Library, so you can save it in Instagram if you'd prefer. Let's get started. Before we get to the nitty-gritty of sources, let's just consider research more broadly. So what is research? Well, it's simply an attempt to find an answer to a question. You use sources like books, magazines, journal articles and the like to familiarise yourself with the research topic, and then you piece the information together to come up with a hypothesis about what the answer might be. You might present that in the form of an essay, a literature review, or a presentation. You might make a YouTube video, or you might do some experimental research. You're usually judged on the quality of the research you've done, as well as the end results. So if your end result wasn't quite what you'd hoped for, if your methods were sound and ethical, you'll still do well. It can be really helpful to remember this when you're doing research in science. Focus on the process rather than achieving a particular result. There are typically 7 steps to research. Step 1, finding a topic to research. Podcasts can be great to help you find something of interest. Step 2, refining that topic. You'll probably have a set time and level of effort that you're willing or able to spend researching. So you need to ensure your topic is adequately refined and defined so as to be appropriate to that length of time and level of effort. Mind mapping is a really great way to assess what a topic would entail and what subtopics might be available to you. Step 3, finding key sources. This will be the key to the success of your research. No matter how much time and effort you put into your research, if you're using bad sources, your research will be flawed and your answer will be unsatisfactory. Take some time to get this right. Step 4, taking notes on your sources. This is what takes quite a lot of time. It's often an overlooked skill in the research process. There are so many ways you can go wrong here. Check out our guides on this via SharePoint. Step 5, creating your work, whether that be original research, an experiment, or a literature review. This is often the hardest part of research, compiling all the information you've gained, critically engaging with it, and working out what your own unique take on the topic is. In most cases, to get those higher marks, you're looking to give the reader an idea of the scope of the topic, to introduce them to the key leading theories, to consider the current state of research, highlight gaps in the research, and show how your work relates to the field of research. Step 6, doing additional research if necessary. Often you'll start creating your work and begin forming your own ideas and find there are still gaps in your understanding or a few things that you're not fully clear about. You'll need to go back and do some more targeted research to iron out any remaining issues. Step 7, citing your sources and producing a bibliography. This is an important part of the research process. It's not just a box-ticking exercise that your teachers make you do. It's essential that anyone engaging with your research is able to see your sources and understand your methods so they can feel confident that you have worked ethically, to a high standard, and are willing to be tested on your hypotheses. It's fundamental to science research, so don't let yourself down on this. In this video, we're going to look at the variety of sources you can consult. But if you want to find out more about any of the other steps in this process, get in touch with the library team or check out our guides on SharePoint. So, choosing and investigating your sources. You want to search strategically. Once you've identified the main concepts in your research question, the next step is to search comprehensively. Check synonyms like hypertension and high blood pressure. alternative spellings like leukemia, and database terminology like cancer and neoplasm. Make sure you're searching for all the relevant terminology. There are 3 types of sources: primary, secondary, and tertiary. Primary sources are the raw material, first-hand data, results from experiments. Secondary sources recount and interpret information, providing analysis and opinion that must be evaluated for bias. Tertiary sources compile and summarise primary and secondary source material, presenting definitions and background contextual information, things like textbooks and dictionaries. Make sure you understand the difference and you choose your type and variety of sources to suit your task. Start small and target 3 to 5 of the best sources to start with. These should be leading theorists, seminal experiments, maybe tertiary source material that helps you understand the scope of your topic. Don't start out trying to read 15 sources, as you're likely to get overwhelmed, frustrated, distracted, steered off course. Choose 3 to 5 key sources and focus on them intently. The key to success is to do more with less here. When you've fully grasped the 3 to 5 sources, then you can move on to another 3 to 5. Those initial sources may have mentioned key theorists or important research that you'd like to look at next. Check the references from your initial sources for recommended further reading suggestions. Search multiple information providers. We'll look more in depth at your options in a moment, but for now, just know that using a variety of information providers will help you minimise bias and enable you to cast your net wide and retrieve as many different sources as possible. There is no one single database that will contain all there is to know on your topic, and each and every information provider will have its advantages and disadvantages. And when researching, it's important that you allow time to rest and digest. Take regular breaks and allow your mind to drift away from your research. This is when your internal secretary will quickly and quietly file all the new information away in an easily retrievable place in your brain, allowing for better understanding, recall, and synthesis. It may seem counterintuitive, but time away from research can be really beneficial. When you're rested, come back to the work, look at it afresh, compile a summary of what you've learnt so far, and move on. The school library offers so much more than books on shelves. Yes, there are books, both print and e-books, but there are also magazines, journals, DVDs, and more. There's a large and diverse collection of science books, arranged by curriculum subject, with ecology, medicine, and astronomy well represented. You'll also find a number of magazines and journals, ranging from popular science magazines like Euler, to A-level focused journals like Chemistry Review, and industry-specific ones like The Civil Engineer. You'll want a variety of different sources for your research, and books can be a great tool in your toolbox of research. They will usually provide more general and contextual information. They'll be great for getting yourself well versed in the topic. But do consider the audience the book is targeted towards. Is it popular science? Is it more for academics? You're unlikely to find the latest cutting-edge science in books though, since it takes a certain amount of time to write, proofread, format, publish and sell a book. For that, you'll want to look in more ephemeral sources like magazines, which will offer short bite-sized snippets of information, and journals, which will offer the more in-depth and academic information that's likely to be more useful to a research project. However, be aware that this kind of information, by its nature, is often not as established, supported, or well proven over time by the academic community. Journals are published more frequently than books and often have a shorter review time. This isn't to say you shouldn't use them, simply that you may need to spend more time assessing the credibility. You can visit the library to browse the shelves or check out the catalogue from the comfort of your room. You can always find a link kings.circahosting.com on our SharePoint area. The library subscribes to over 50 journals and databases that can be accessed online. These e-resources go beyond what Google can provide. They're selected for their high-quality content and their relevance to the curriculum. If you've ever searched on Google Scholar and found something relevant, only to be hit by a paywall, the library e-resources are your answer. You need to understand that there are multiple layers to the web. The surface web, which is what Google can show you. The deep web, which is where you'll find things that require a payment or login details to access, including our e-resources. And the dark web, a discussion for another time perhaps. The library subscribes to access information that is often held within the deep web. So that article Google Scholar is temptingly dangling at you might be something you can access through the library for free. Also, Google doesn't provide you with all of the articles available on your topic. Most academic articles are only available through subscription to a subject database. The library doesn't have access to every subject database, but it does subscribe to enough to enable you to do your schoolwork. You can find these subject databases and online articles by visiting the library's area on SharePoint. We have a page called Library Resources, and from there you can navigate to e-resources and then browse by subject. You'll notice our list of science e-resources is organised into multidiscipline databases and discipline-specific ones. There are also online courses, podcasts, and other resources. And our paid-for e-resources are supplemented by freely available online content recommended by library and teaching staff. Bear in mind, not every e-resource will be suitable for your topic, just as there's unlikely to be one e-resource that answers all of your research needs. Read the descriptions we provide and maybe even have an exploratory browse through the content to assess the database before doing a targeted search. Any login details required to access the information is provided after the description of the e-resource. You'll find e-resources like the BMJ Online, one of the most well-known medical journals of peer-reviewed content and clinical knowledge, or parliamentary research briefings, which contain research produced for the Lords and Commons as well as POST, the Parliamentary Office of Science and Technology, with comprehensive factual information on major pieces of legislation, policy areas and topical issues. Once you've found an e-resource with some useful looking sources in it, before you dive into those sources, before you begin reading anything, take note of the authors and their institutional affiliations. If you've not heard of an institution before, Google it. For journal articles, check the review process of the journal. Being peer-reviewed means an article has been read and given a seal of approval by an expert in the field. However, peer review isn't the be-all and end-all. If the expert in the field also happens to be a colleague of the author, that approval may not be as unbiased as you might think. Check when the research was undertaken, if you can find it, as well as the date the information was published. Identify and assess the approach and the methods chosen. You don't need to understand it in enough detail to replicate the work, but make sure you've grasped the basics. Now consider the results. Do the figures and tables support the results? Any times the word significant or non-significant are used, these have precise statistical meanings, so make sure you understand the language used. Consider the sample size. Is it appropriate? Have they accounted for variables such as gender? Do they acknowledge any limitations in the research? Anyone stretching their claim should be a red flag to you. Consider the metrics. Sometimes an article is given a metric score. This simply tells you how many times the database has identified that that article has been referred to in other academic literature. Now, a higher score doesn't necessarily mean that it's a better article. Newer, perhaps better articles are likely to have lower scores simply because they've not been around for long. A high score might indicate a lot of conversation about that piece of research, but what they're saying might not necessarily be favourable to the work. You could think of a metric score like an interaction button or feature on social media. Now, if you do still need to search online for some information to supplement the e-resources, be wary of republished work. People sometimes get tripped up by articles that have been written and published online in one place and then republished online in another. Very often the article will say, originally published in wherever, republished with the author's permission. If you find something like this, find the original article and read that rather than the republished item. Often, more unknown websites will republish with author's permission because they want to borrow some of the authority of the original author. What you can see is that the formatting of the article might be used to drive you to other articles on their site that maybe aren't as authoritative as the initial article, or they may include images, graphs and headlines that look like they're part of the original article when in fact they're not. They're often misleading and should be avoided. And if research wasn't hazardous enough already, sometimes reliable sites can get it wrong. There are examples of Cambridge University Press, Science Direct and Sage Journals, all well-regarded academic publishers, publishing the work of racists and white supremacists. Now, they're generally still available to read for historical interest, but this contextual information is rarely given, and it can be easy to think those articles should be seen on par with other articles in the database. So do make sure, if you do nothing else, check the author. Google them. See what you can find out about them before reading their work. Are they considered to be experts in their field? Do they have appropriate experience in the topic? And don't forget to collect your references. As I've previously mentioned, citing your sources and producing a bibliography is an important part of the research process. There are many styles of referencing, so make sure you know if a particular style is required for your work. But with every style, there are two elements. There's the citation, which is when you refer to a specific information source and list where you found this piece of information. This happens in the body of your writing, wherever you mention something derived from things you've read or watched or heard from someone else. And then there's the bibliography, sometimes called a reference list. This is the list of all the information sources you used to research your work. All referencing follows the same basic formula. When you use a source, you'll need to list the author or creator of that source, the title of that source, the publication details, which should include the name of the publisher, the location of the publisher, and the date of publication. And depending on what type of source it is, you might also have to list when you accessed it and how. This is so that you or someone else can find the original source at a later date. This isn't just so they can check that you've referenced correctly, but it's really helpful if the reader or marker wants to learn more about what's just been referred to. The different referencing styles and formats may want you to list these things in different orders or to put commas or full stops in different places, but the basic principles are the same. When you read something, you should always make a note of these things. Don't just list the title and author and think you'll come back to the rest. Believe me, it's never that easy. Keep a list of things you've read, watched or listened to with all the required information. You won't know at the start of researching your topic if you'll use it in your final work, but at least you'll have a note of it. Be aware that publication dates can vary from book to book, so make sure you list that correctly. That quote on page 45 in the 2012 book may not be on page 45 in the 2014 updated version. Even if the content in those books is exactly the same, that mistake could land you with a charge of plagiarism. Also, keep a note of the date you last checked a web page. If that web page is deleted between handing in your work and your work being marked, in most cases, we can use that date to identify what the web page looked like on that day, even if the web page itself has been deleted. So in summary, whether you're embarking on an essay, a presentation, a video for social media, a literature review, or some experimental research, it's vital that you choose and investigate your sources carefully and strategically. Make sure you have a variety of information sources from an array of appropriate providers. Make use of the library and the e-resources available to you. But remember that whoever the content provider is, you should always assess the content before applying it in your own work. Remember that you're judged on the quality of the research you've done as well as the end results, so focus on the process rather than on achieving a particular result. And always include your references. I hope that's been helpful, and I wish you good luck in all your research endeavours.